Hey everyone, it's me Lone, hope you're doing alright. The Pit is finally here. Fallout 76's first expedition has landed upon us, and I'm here to give my honest review on it. People have been obviously looking forward to this for a while now, asking whether it's good or not, whether it's worthwhile coming back to the game for, if you haven't played in a couple of months or so, and that does include me, mind you, so I'm going to give my honest opinions on it. And before we get into the review, I need to mention this is a review, so for full transparency, I used to work at the company. I've not been there since February of this year, but I used to work there, I have friends there, I still talk to Bethesda, and because of that, I have biases. I'm going to be too harsh in some areas, not harsh enough in other areas, but I'm going to try my best to be as fair as possible, and all I can do is put all my cards on the table, so hopefully that is enough. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, but with all that out of the way, let's get into my review of Fallout 76's The Pitt Expedition. Alrighty, so first off, let's talk about the pros. Now, the first pro is going to be talking about ultra cells. To be very clear, I'm not a fan of the ultra cells, and I'll be talking about that in the cons section of this review. But I have to mention them here because the game at least does have a clever lore reference to explain why you need to do tasks to be able to get ultra cells in the first place to fuel the vertibird. They could have easily just said that's the way it is and we're not going to explain it, but at the very least they included some sort of effort to provide an in-game lore explanation as to why you had to do things to get the ultra cells. So at the very least, even though I don't like him, and again I'll talk about that later, I appreciated that fact. Now, second of all, they have tried to put in some interesting characters and interesting conversations. Is any of this stuff like mind-blowing and blowing me away? No, of course not, right? But there are some fun conversations in there, some ones that I was actually very interested in, other characters I didn't care about, but at the very least, even though this isn't an expansion like Wastelanders, for instance, or even Still Rain or Still Dawn, which are very lore and story-based, they've at least included a range of characters with a range of backgrounds and dialogue trees. I appreciated that, right? And through these conversations as well, we get to find out more about the Pit. It just expands upon the lore of the Fallout universe. And to me, whenever that happens, I do appreciate it. We get to understand about the history of the Pit, what happened after the bombs dropped, how things are going there, and it kind of sets the platform for eventually, obviously, what happened with Fallout 3 and the Pit. So all of that, I like it. It's just nice to listen to those conversations, take it all in. So for sure, that was a pro for me. The next one, it's a very small one. It's a minor touch, but I'm going to mention it here anyways. Before you actually get into the Pit and you're in the vertibird, there's this cool moment where you're sitting there and everyone's spawning in. Like, obviously you can do missions in the Pit with up to 4 people, and if you're the leader, you're sitting in the vertibird watching people come in, and when everyone's ready, you can click on the intercom and then fly down. I kind of like that. It's like we're all getting ready for a mission. Silly to say, I know, but I thought it was a nice little touch, so that was a pro for me. The next pro, and I believe this is probably the biggest pro of the Pit, is that the Pit is absolutely gorgeous. It's not just the fact that I'm happy to be back there, but it looks really, really good with the upgraded engine. Fallout 3 was released a very long time ago now, and as much as I love it, you need mods to kind of get it somewhat up to today's standard. And I'm not saying that Fallout 76 is the most graphically impressive game out there. Of course it's not, right? But it's still nice to see the Pit with the upgraded graphics that Fallout 4 brought with its upgrades to the engine. So really nice to see. I thought it looked beautiful. I also like that Trogs are back, okay? They mentioned it and instantly I got excited. There's another negative that I'll mention related to enemies. I'm just glad that the Trogs are adding a little bit more diversity to the enemy variation in the game, and the fact that they're there, and they had some cool ways that the Trogs kind of came up, especially with the Union Jews. You would come outside and the girl was like, what the hell is that? And then they would come out of nowhere and attack you. That was a cool little moment the first time. Eventually it's going to get repetitive, probably so, but I did like that the first time around, so that was cool. And then the last thing, even though it's not a thing right now, I believe tomorrow at the time of this recording they're going to introduce it, but when you start to do Pit missions weekly, you will get a random rare reward every week that you do it. And I think that that's really cool. I have a lot to say when it comes to the stamps and how long it's going to take us to get all the new rewards that are being introduced by the Pit. But at the very least, Bethesda's like, you know what, if you play, you get a random rare reward. That's very, very nice. I like that. And the cherry on top is that you can't get duplicate rewards with that feature either. So every time you do it, each week, you will get something new from that rare reward pool. So very nice touch. Thank you for doing that, Bethesda. It's going to make the grind a little bit less tedious, but I'll be talking about that in the cons section. Speaking of, let's get to the cons of the Pit. at least in my experience. So first of all, there were some issues with the dialogue a little bit. Often when I was, in conversations, whether it's starting a conversation or getting to the next conversation option, so sometimes there's just this big delay when it comes to seeing the next dialogue options, and it can be anywhere from a couple of seconds up to 5, 6, 7 seconds. I don't know why it happens with Fallout 76, but it kept happening, and it just kind of felt weird to me. Like randomly, we're just stopping talking to each other for 5 seconds. I don't know why that is the case, but it's a very small thing, so I thought I'd mention it. All right, so collecting Ultra Cells. This is the one thing that I wish just wasn't a thing. Don't get me wrong. I understand why Bethesda just doesn't want to be like, hey, here's your Ultra Cells, go do your expedition for the day, right? And be the team leader. Like, doing some little minor task to be able to get the Ultra Cells kind of makes sense lore-wise. You have to do a little bit to get them. I trust me, I get it, and I even mentioned that I like the lore reference that they used in the game to make sense of it all, but I see it getting very tedious and very repetitive very quickly. The reason why I say that is because I did it, the last 2 nights, of course, and the last 2 nights I got the exact same repeatables, right? Where you had to do the cooking, and the other where you had to give 50 steel scrap. There was one that was different where you had to go around and take photos of things. That was cool, right? But I've already gotten 2 of those that are repeated. And I think after a couple of sessions and a couple of weeks and a couple of months, we're all going to get sick of it. So I wish that there was just an NPC we can go to, like, yeah, you're ready for the day, and then you get your Ultra Cells and that's it. I wish that was it, and we didn't have to do these little same tasks over and over, because I feel like it's just adding to the chore factor and the repetitiveness of the Pit. And it's going to have enough of that already, and I'll touch on that in a bit. Now, I'm going to mention this, but I do not believe this was the game's fault. I had 2 crashes during my 2 nights of playing, but for me, I think that was related to my 12th gen CPU and my RAM and all this crap with XMP profiles. I had the settings wrong, and I fixed it, and that I didn't have a crash since. The reason why I mention it is because I know some people have had crashing and issues with certain areas going in and the game just crashes. But for me, I don't think it was related to the game. And I forgot to mention this in the pros, and I have to mention it now. In all other aspects, aside from those 2 crashes, which I think were unrelated, it ran beautifully for me. Like, inside the Pit, I was actually surprised how smooth the gameplay was. It was buttery. Like, I didn't have any other issues from that, aside from this one other moment, and I'll mention it now, where I tried to open a terminal or sit down for a terminal at the same time as someone else that was with me in the expedition. And I got locked out, and I had the server's not responsive message pop up for like a solid 30, 40 seconds, and I couldn't move. And this was right at the end of, which one was I doing? I was doing From Ashes to Fire. Right at the end of it. So I thought I wouldn't get my rewards, and I had to do it again. Thankfully, after 30 seconds, that popped out, and I was able to finish it, no problem. But that was literally the only issue that I had. Everything else was buttery smooth. But I'm going to mention it now because, especially if you're on console, you might have some performance issues with this, but at least for me on PC, it was 90% amazing. So I will mention that now. I've said this, I touched on this before, and I said it before, but the Fanatics just being another Raider group or a Raider-esque group is something that I didn't really care for. Like, we've had Raiders, we've had Blooded Eagles, now we've had the Fanatics. Like, I kind of wish that there would be more or just different human enemies that don't just feel like they're Raiders. Now, they did add the Trogs, which is something to kind of counteract that. But when I first saw the Fanatics, I was like, oh, you don't really interest me, right? So, yeah, just another kind of cultist group. That's something that I didn't really appreciate it. There were some very small issues of going into certain areas and locations where enemies would just appear in front of you randomly and attack you. Obviously, that wasn't intended. Some issues with the spawning in there, but a very minor issue. You get over that. You kill them quickly anyways. I will say this, that I kind of wish that there were more unique end bosses. I was hoping that at the end of Union Dues and at the end of From Ashes to Fire, I keep forgetting that name, I wish there was like a giant Trog that would attack you that felt like the Wendigo Colossus in the public event, Earl Williams. I wish there was something like that to keep it a little bit more interesting. And there kind of was a bigger enemy, but that was pretty easy to kill for both. I wish there was something unique in an end boss and something to look forward to, kind of like the Scorched Beast Queen and kind of like Earl Williams. So next up, in terms of the gameplay generally, is this thing actually fun to play? Are you actually going to enjoy sitting down either solo or with your friends and playing through the Pit, completing these expeditions? it is admittedly a difficult question to answer, and I think it depends where you're coming from. If you are a long-time Fallout 76 player, and you're very well acquainted with the gameplay and the combat of the game, you've engaged in that endgame loop, you enjoy taking your souped-up legendary weapon and killing a bunch of enemies in different contexts, in different public events and quests, etc. If that is you, then yes, I think there is a level of enjoyment to be had with these expeditions in the pit, Union Jews and From Ashes to Fire. Especially on your first few runs, it's new, it's different, there are different objectives to do. Again, there are cool moments, especially with the trogs. I think you will have some fun if that is you. But if that is not you, this is not bringing anything new or revolutionary to the table. If you just didn't like Fallout 76's gameplay or combat in the past, this is not convincing you otherwise. This is for the people that do enjoy it. This is just more for you. But the problem comes into it when you consider, and I want to talk about this next, when you consider the stamps and the reward system and how everything is built up. It is all designed to get you to keep doing these runs, keep doing these missions over and over and over and over again. That is the only way you're getting the rewards that you want. So eventually, it doesn't matter how fun these two missions are. You could have a blast with Union Jews and a blast from, with Ashes to Fire, for the first few runs. And they could be the most fun quests and missions in the world. But when you've done them 40, 50 times, they will feel tiresome eventually. They're going to get repetitive. And that, to me, is a negative. It is a con, especially when only 2 of them right now exist. And you have to keep doing them to get stamps to get the rewards. Eventually, we're going to tire of them, just like we did with daily ops. Initially, daily ops are a little bit of fun to do, but after you've done them a bunch, you don't want to do them anymore, right? And again, because it's so baked in with the rewards and grinding and stuff, you really do need to enjoy that endgame loop of Fallout 76, and you really do need to thrive off the grind. So it is a difficult question to answer, and some of you might also find issue with a lot of the optional objectives to get the maximum amount of stamps that you can in a run, because some of them do feel very fetch questy, like just collect these steel ingots or get these collars, and you have to keep doing them every run to be able to get the max amount of stamps. I think some people might find those aspects not so much fun. And then let's talk about stamps. So, and I brought down my phone for this. This is not new territory for Fallout 76 and for BGS when it comes to this game. We had it with Wastelanders and Gold Bullion, that there was a new currency introduced that was tied in with all the missions and stuff and the dailies and whatnot, and it would take you forever to get everything. I don't believe I actually have collected everything when it comes to getting the Gold Bullion and collecting it from the vendor. So that was Wastelanders, and we're seeing it again here with stamps and the Pit or expeditions. And if you actually look at how much you get for each run, I believe it's up to 10 if you do all the optional objectives. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't get that much, right? And then, so when I finished it the first time, I was like, all right, cool. Went to the vendor, and some of the prices were like, wow, how long is it going to take me to just get the things that I want, let alone all of them? And I was doing some quick calculations, saw some commentary from some other players as well. Even if you were to do 4 or 5, 6 runs every day, you were the leader for one of them, you always did the optional objectives, it would still probably take you months to get everything. It depends on how many runs that you do and how dedicated you are. And if you want to get them quickly, I guess the problem is that you're having to do the same runs over and over and over, and that's where the repetitive factor comes into it. That's where things just start to feel like a chore and the grind really hits you. And I think for a lot of people, that's going to be a negative. But for others, that is Fallout 76 in a nutshell. That is what the game is. This is, again, it's not something new, and it's not something to excuse it. But if you have come to expect that kind of gameplay and that gameplay loop with Fallout 76, you're probably going to be right at home with the Pit. But for me, like, I don't want to be doing the same runs every day to completely maximize on the number of stamps that I get to get the rewards quickly. If I'm going to do this, I'm probably going to do 2 or 3 runs every day so it doesn't feel too much of a chore. I'll most likely want to come back and play with friends as well, and I'll touch on this in a second, because if I was doing this completely solo, that's when it would feel even more boring doing the same stuff over and over and over, and you know what I mean? So I think that has to be called out as a negative. Do I wish it was different? Yes. Do I wish there was a different way that this expansion could have been bigger and could have been more Wastelanders-like? For sure. But this is the way that BGS has decided to kind of draw out the gameplay as long as they can. If you want to get the rewards, you're going to have to keep doing the same runs and keep getting stamps. At the very least, we know that eventually they're going to be adding more missions like Union Jews and the other one from Ashes to Fire. So that'll help, but eventually those will become tiresome too. So it is a bit of a shame that the cost for each reward in terms of stamps is so high. I would have appreciated it if they were a little bit lower, but again, at least we get that free reward every time. So, and then I'll talk about some neutral things here. I kind of touch on the fact that I think this would be better with friends. That's Fallout 76 in a nutshell. So it's not really a negative or a positive. Fallout 76 is always more fun with friends. The game is entirely built upon that. So I think when you're playing Pitt and you're doing the runs and you're doing expeditions, it's going to be much more of a better time if you are with friends and doing the runs, right? You get to talk to each other, chat shit, and do these kind of mindless tasks. If you're doing a solo, it would become very tiresome very quickly. So what are my overall opinions and conclusions when it comes to expeditions and the first expedition being the Pitt? This is not going to be the thing that saves. In people's eyes, they think this game is dead. It's not dead, but if you're being overly critical, this is not going to be the thing that quote-unquote saves Fallout 76. It doesn't need saving, but you get my point. This is not going to be the thing that substantially increases the player base of the game. It is not taking it to new heights or doing anything mind-blowing. Really, the expeditions in the Pitt are for the end game player, for the people that are already invested in Fallout 76 or you've played it in the past and you want something more to do. That's what this is really for. It is the same grind and end game loop that we have come to expect with this game, and some people love it, some people hate it. It is typical Fallout 76. So is this, if you have not played the game for a while, is this something to come back to? Maybe for a little bit, if you again want to be in the Pit, see something a little bit different, get some of the rewards and it's cool. But if you are like done with that kind of grind and end game loop of Fallout 76, then this is not going to be something that gets you up in the morning, right? It's not going to be something that you suddenly become super passionate about. So you do it and you just know, like, set your expectations. This is what you're going to expect. If you had never played Fallout 76 before, would you jump into this just for the Pit? Of course not. Like, it's a higher level thing as well. I think you do need to be level 50 for it. And the enemies can get decently hard if you don't have your build spec right. But do I think that this is for new players or going to bring new players to the game? It's not going to bring new players to the game. No. It could have been that if it was like this huge expansion like Wastelanders style, but it's not. This is for the existing player. This is for the endgame player that wanted more stuff to do, something different, new rewards, something new to grind for. And that's what it is. That's the reality. So I said my positives. I said my negatives. I enjoyed parts of it. Am I going to play this for a few weeks and drop it? I think the chances are decent. I at least want to get some of the rewards. But that's it. That's my honest review of Expeditions in the Pit. Let me know if you've played it, your thoughts in the comments below, or let me know what you think about my opinions in the comments. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.